Hello students! Welcome back to class. My name is Miss Katie. I'm that vegan teacher. And look at my sweater. It says vegan from now on. So that's a reminder to everybody that from this moment on, you can be vegan. Even if you have a piece of meat in your mouth right now, after you swallow it, from that moment on, you can become vegan. What interests me so much is the journey that people take to become vegan. Even the smartest people never become vegan like that. And this is a very interesting example. This young man has a channel here called Cosmic Skeptic. See here? Cosmic Skeptic. He has 412,000 subscribers. And you see the date on this video. It says April 6, 2019. And at this point, Alex, who is a really smart guy, I mean, much smarter than me, much younger than me. I think he's 20 something, 22, I'm not sure, 25, 20 something. And he is studying at Oxford University, and he was not vegan at the time of this video. He is now 100% vegan and an animal rights activist. But what I think is interesting is this video is him talking about not yet being vegan, but realizing that it's where he was going to go. And it wasn't long after this video that he really became fully vegan. So I thought I would watch a little bit of it with you guys just because it's so interesting. We might not watch the whole thing because it's 24 minutes, but I want to introduce you to who he is, and I want you to follow his channel and learn from him. So let's watch a little bit together, all right? His name is Alex O'Connor.
I've been doing a bit of reading and a lot of thinking, and the more I do, the more my sympathy for the philosophy of veganism grows. I should state I'm still not a vegan, and perhaps that's because the debate in my mind has been almost purely philosophical rather than practical.
So he's saying it has been philosophical, meaning he's been thinking about it, but in practical terms about what he's going to buy, what's in his fridge at the moment, and just maybe not knowing how to cook. He's thinking, well, I'm not there yet. So remember, my theory is that it takes 100 clicks until you're vegan. It has to hit your head, has to hit your heart. And what he's saying is that it seems like it started to be logical for him, and it's also hit his heart, but he's just not quite get there in terms of like, well, what do I do? But let's listen together. Let's keep watching.
But now, whenever I consider the future of my diet, I can't help but imagine that animal products will one day no longer be a component of it. Albert Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, wrote, "The principle can be established that for a man who does not cheat, what he believes to be true must determine his action." And it's in that vein that I realise that there can only be one of two outcomes for me. Either someone convinces me that the arguments I'm about to present are flawed, or at some point I'll just have to suck it up and join the growing trend of a herbivorous lifestyle. Now don't worry, my channel isn't turning into a veganism advocacy channel or anything, but I feel like the purpose of this channel is to discuss interesting philosophical topics, and this is one of the most important of them all. So I wanted to make a video presenting some, but certainly not all, of the arguments that are leading me to believe that every day of my life I commit an act so immoral that I can hardly bear to think about it, and see if any of you, by way of comment or response, can talk me out of it. It's something we haven't talked about on this channel before, and so even if you don't agree with these arguments, I hope you find it useful to hear them presented nonetheless.
So this is interesting. He has a huge audience, and he is basically coming out of the closet as a vegan, but he's opening it up to his audience to say, but hey, if you guys can convince me that I'm wrong, I won't be going down that path. And so what's amazing about Alex is he managed to hold on to his entire audience and a lot of people because they believe in rational, logical thinking and who appreciate his mind have followed him along on that journey. Now, I don't know what percentage did, but it seems to me like he hasn't lost any of his viewership. And he also has been on TikTok, where you can find him under the account called Ask a Vegan.
So, if you think that you can philosophically defend eating meat or factory farming, consider this a challenge. Believe me, I'd love to be convinced to agree with you, but I can't fool myself. We'll discuss reasons people commonly give to justify eating meat and try to see whether or not they're flawed. So, with a distant hope that someone out there can stop me from fully succumbing to them, I, a current meat eater, present some arguments for veganism. Just two things to note as a throat clearing. Firstly, this, unlike other videos like it, is a purely philosophical and moral video. You won't find statistics about global warming or footage of slaughterhouses here. It's all brain-based, armchair moral philosophy, if you will. Secondly, I'm not doing a video like this because I'm some kind of animal lover. I do love animals, it's true, but don't think that you need to feel this way yourself in order to justify veganism. Peter Singer points out in his seminal Animal Liberation that you don't need to see yourself as some kind of lover of black people to see that racism is wrong.
True.
I hope that we can view this morally and reasonably rather than purely emotionally. That's why I won't try to win you over with footage of animals being mistreated or things like that, though believe me, that does exist and it's effective. With that said, here goes.
So here's where a commercial comes in, but what I find very interesting is that Alex started off. You see, Alex started off with an audience of critical thinkers. So he had thousands and thousands of people who were already very smart, who understood logical fallacies. They understood all of the reasons for things like why not to believe in religion and things like that, or God, or why science is important. So if he has already this audience of people who are logically thinking, then it's not a far stretch for him to be able to convince them that logically animals do feel pain, and logically we shouldn't be hurting other sentient beings. And so this is what's really great about Alex's approach. See, the difference between Alex and myself is that I came onto TikTok and started talking to a bunch of people who did not have this type of training in how to think properly. And so trying to navigate that with a bunch of young like teenagers who have a gang mentality, who have a I want to be popular with my friends mentality. This is a much, much harder audience to penetrate. What Alex had the luxury of having is this ability of this access to what we call low-hanging fruit, which means the people who are already ready and ripe to learn. So this is an advantage that Alex had. And this is actually why it is so important as animal rights activists that we use logic and that we try to get the attention of the best thinkers in the world, the smartest people, and try to explain to them the reason, and also the most caring people. Because when you can reach those groups of people, that will filter down. So I find it really interesting.
So speaking of Peter Singer, perhaps the most important animal ethicist of recent memory, I think the main philosophical takeaway from his book, which you should all definitely read, by the way, I'll leave a link in the description.
One of the things that bothers me about this book is that actually, and I hate to say this, but Peter Singer is not a full vegan, even after writing this book that many, many people have read. And that is extremely disappointing to me, and it is why I never recommend it.
Is this, that the boundary we've constructed between human beings and other animals is completely arbitrary and almost entirely unjustified. Here's a good quote. In the popular mind, the term animal lumps together beings as different as oysters and chimpanzees, while placing a gulf between chimpanzees and humans, although our relationship to those apes is much closer than the oysters. It's a fair point. Why should we consider ourselves so different from other animals, and to the extent that they're ours to do with as we please? Here we deal with argument number one in favour of meat eating. Humans are superior to other animals because of X, and therefore we can eat them. Yeah, few problems with that. Firstly, by what metric are we superior? Perhaps the only feasible answer to this is something along the lines of intelligence. Clearly, human beings possess a higher cognitive ability than, say, a chicken. But my question is this, what relevance does that hold to morality? Why should intelligence be the metric by which we measure moral worth? It's arbitrary, it means nothing in itself. Should we morally value human beings with higher intelligence over other humans with lower intelligence? I think not. But even if you do, we surely shouldn't value them to the extent that they should be able to mistreat, kill, and eat the less intelligent humans just because they think they taste nice. Clearly, it's not intelligence alone that can justify this kind of practice. And again, why intelligence? Why not choose some other feature than intelligence, like, say, eyesight? Clearly, eagles have a far superior eyesight to humans, But does that give them any higher moral worth?
You see what he's saying? It's so interesting. He's saying, why should we base it on intelligence? Why don't we base things on who has the best eyesight, or who has the best hearing, or who is maybe the strongest or the fastest or the most musical or whatever? It could be any kind of trait. So I'm going to give Alex, on my little notepad here, I'm going to give him some check marks and some X's. Now, the check mark I'm going to give him is that he is thinking about becoming vegan in this video, and he is being completely truthful and honest and raw with his audience. And I think that's really great to say, look, I'm not vegan yet, but here's what I'm thinking about. And that's what I encourage all of you to do who are not yet vegan. All of my students who are watching, look at his example. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm not vegan yet, but I'm learning. And now I'm going to make a video about my journey, what I've learned, and where I'm going. So I congratulate him on his bravery. I will give him an X, though, for trying to get people to read Peter Singer's book, given that he is not a full vegan. Even though he wrote that book a long time ago, I still think, and it's a very difficult one for me to say, because I know a lot of people have read, especially the first chapter in there, and have really realized that they can be vegan and they should be vegan, and that helped Alex to become vegan. So in that sense, I guess it's good to recommend it. But on the other hand, I don't want to draw attention to somebody who is not in the end fully vegan right now. That is so disappointing. It's a little bit to me like Jane Goodall. Many of you know she was a scientist, is a scientist who went and worked with the chimpanzees, and she is vegetarian, but she is not vegan. She never took the final step to stop eating cheese and consuming milk. And why is that? There's like a mental block in these people that leads them to go only so far, but not further. Whereas Alex, in the end, understood that he needed to go all the way. And for that, I praise him.
Of course not. What is it about intelligence that its mere possession grants you a right to life and liberty that should be restricted from those who lack it? Nothing. It's a poor excuse. Now, obviously, high intelligence is arguably more useful to humanity than good eyesight is, but we have to be careful to distinguish that we're not looking for how we can judge what is most useful, but rather how we can judge what has more moral worth. And this can't be linked to intelligence. Trying to find a quality that a being can possess to justify them treating other beings who don't have that quality differently is known to philosophers as naming the trait, or as I'm presenting it, the name the trait argument. Essentially, the argument is that it's not possible to find the trait that non-human animals supposedly lack, that if a human were to lack, we treat the human how we currently treat the animals. For instance, you say we kill the animals because they don't have trait X that humans do have. And the argument is, if we found a human being who themselves lacked X, would we be justified in killing them? If the answer is no, then we haven't actually identified the trait that justifies killing animals at all. You can put anything you like where X goes. You might say that we kill animals because they can't talk, for instance. The response is, if there's a human who can't talk, should we kill them? Of course not. Now, the ability to talk is, of course, not a common argument, but it illustrates the point.
Right.
As an example, let's take the earlier and more common point of intelligence. The argument from the person naming the trait would be that we can treat animals as we please because they have less intelligence than we do. That's the trait. Not only is this not technically provable beyond necessarily biased metrics of intelligence, not only does it stink of so-called scientific racism, where the maltreatment of other races was justified by an appeal to their alleged lack of intelligence, but if we took a human being and turned them into the least intelligent human being you know of, would you flinch if I turned them upside down and slit their throat for food? Why? If the argument is that we can kill animals because they're less intelligent, then you're saying that it's merely lacking intelligence that justifies the taking of their life. If this doesn't apply to humans too, then there's something you're leaving out of your reasoning, because it's not just intelligence. And what is that something? Well, it's invariably the mere fact that humans are the same species as you are, and that non-human animals aren't. This, of course, has absolutely no moral relevance of its own accord, and it's just not a good enough reason to mistreat other living beings. It has the same ethical strength as appealing to the innate value of belonging to a certain race or gender. That is to say, it has no ethical strength. And I should stress that this applies for any quality you can think of. All I'm looking for here is philosophical consistency. If you said to me that actually, yes, you do think it's justifiable to kill human beings of lower intelligence for meat, I'd want to talk you out of it, of course, but I can absolutely see why you'd think the same thing about animals, and at least you'd be being consistent. But if you justify one and not the other, you've got a problem. And we certainly can't use morally arbitrary metrics like intelligence to justify the killing of either animals or humans.
Very good.
Okay, so what about something like emotional intelligence, you might say? Human beings are more sensitive to pain than other animals. They develop complex emotional fears and attachments, not to mention the fact that we care about each other. This distinguishes us from other animals. Other animals don't feel the same level of pain that we do. They don't fear their own death, and they certainly don't care about each other in the same way that we do. This is a second argument in favour of meat eating. This, if you ask me, doesn't work either. Firstly, on the point of pain, let me bring up something that made my stomach turn when I first thought about it. In fact, of all the small things that came together to make me start thinking about veganism...
All the clicks. Remember what I said. It takes 100 clicks to become vegan. So this is what he's talking about. This is why I urge you all the time to watch all the documentaries you can, read all the books that you can, watch all of the YouTubers that you can. Don't just look at Miss Katie, that vegan teacher, and say, well, no, I can't be vegan. Allow me to give you some clicks, but then move on and look at other YouTubers. Read other books. Go to protests in your area against fur, against anything, meat. Go to a sanctuary. Go to a zoo and just sit there and look at the animals and ponder, should we be putting them here? Look at what's on your plate. All of these clicks matter. And I find this so fascinating because at this time he's not quite vegan. Or so he says. He says it's just a practical matter. So I don't really know. I haven't seen this video yet. So I don't know if he means just because his fridge still has food in it, or because he's on a unit, because he does go to university. Maybe he's at a campus at the time of this video and he doesn't know what else to buy. He just hasn't figured out sources of protein yet, and he's just like, what do I get? Because you get into the same habits all the time. So remember, like I said, this video was on April 6, 2019, and it was not long after that he became a vegan animal rights activist. And I'm not sure of the exact date that he became vegan, and he probably doesn't know either, because you can see here he clearly is vegan, but he's not saying it yet. And he's saying it's because of practical reasons. That's why I tell you, when you are going through your process, to write it down. If you just know that you're going to end up being vegan, but you're not there yet, still, write down the steps that you are going through. It's so fascinating. You will thank me later that you looked at it and realized all these little steps on your voyage that helps you to get there. And it's so interesting. And he has at least this video that he made as some kind of evidence of his journey.
Seriously, this may have been the most grotesque to me. Think about the fact that, as we've already said, an eagle has a much stronger eyesight than humans do. Likewise, dogs are much more sensitive to smell than we are, such that we can't even imagine what it must be like to experience smell as vividly and acutely as they do. Does it not seem reasonable that, given that other animals are more sense-driven creatures than we are, their capacity to feel pain actually far exceeds our own, just as their capacities for eyesight or smell do? It seems rational to think that this may well be the case. I said a moment ago that intelligence is an arbitrary metric by which to judge moral worth. The ability to feel pain, however, is not. It's a matter of fact, definitionally in fact, that pain infringes on well-being. It's reasonable to consider well-being the goal of morality, even if it's just subjectively so. And so if you're going to make the argument that the possession of some superior quality makes one species superior to another, then it's quite possibly the animals that end up on your plate who have a higher claim to moral worth than you do, because the only possible quality that has any relevance here is the ability to feel pain, and they may well feel it more acutely than we do. Ability to feel pain, at the very least, is far more relevant to moral worth than intelligence is. It's worth mediating on the counsel of Jeremy Bentham, who famously wrote of animals, "The question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? Why should the law refuse its protection to any sensitive being?"
So I want to give Alex here several check marks for showing this reference. Alex has clearly done his homework. He's researched a lot, and he's read many of the main quotes that have helped many of us to become vegan.
Well, furthermore, even if it's true that non-human animals really do feel less pain than we do, that's still just not enough. Just because they feel less pain doesn't mean they feel no pain. We might say that if human beings have a pain receptivity of, say, 10, and non-human animals have a pain receptivity of 0, then we can justify the humans killing the animals. But we can't say the same if the animals have a pain receptivity of, say, 7. They're still suffering, even if not to the same extent that humans would be if we treated them the same way. This would be like justifying a small genocide on the grounds that it's not as bad as the Holocaust was. It's still bad, and it's still unjustifiable. Okay, let's move on to something else. This might seem like an odd direction to move in, but I want to introduce you to, or remind you of, the political philosophy of John Rawls. John Rawls was an American liberal philosopher who Bill Clinton once described as, quote, perhaps the greatest political philosopher of the 20th century. In his famous theory of justice, Rawls presented a thought experiment that we could use to determine how best to organize society. Rawls asked us to imagine ourselves in an original position, as he put it, behind a veil of ignorance. You're about to enter society, but from this original position behind the veil, you don't know yet whether you'll be black or white, male, female, rich or poor. You don't know anything about what social characteristics you'll have when you enter this society. It's from this original position, Rawls argues, that we'd be best placed to design society because we design the most just system without biasing it towards our own group. Essentially, we should organize society as if we didn't know who we were going to be within it, to ensure that we're designing it fairly. This thought experiment has been much repeated.
It is absolutely true what he is saying here. The fact that Alex is referring to this group, a theory of justice, is wonderful. Another check mark for you, Alex.
And much applauded because it's reasonable. Surely the fairest way to design society is from a point of impartiality.
Yes.
Well, let's see if you figured out where this is going. I was discussing Rawls with Stephen Woodford recently, and we're both of the opinion that Rawls' thought experiment should not just apply to human beings. So here's my version of the thought experiment. This will probably sound really weird at first, but bear with me. Imagine the same situation. You're about to enter the world and you're currently behind the veil of ignorance in the original position. But it's not that you're about to enter the world as a human being, as Rawls had it. Instead, you're about to enter the world as a thing. As in, you could be any object in the world and you have no idea what you're going to be. So not only could you be white or black or rich or poor, you could be a brick, or a tree, or a mobile phone, or a pig, or a cow, or a human being. You could be anything. You have no way to know.
Right.
Okay, so now, design society. It's worth noting that, philosophically speaking, the particles that construct your being really could have gone to anything else in the universe just as easily, so this isn't trivial. But consider the following. Knowing that you could be a brick in this original position wouldn't make you want to prevent bricks from being used in construction. If you were a brick, you wouldn't know you're a brick, and you wouldn't feel any pain. You wouldn't feel anything. It shouldn't bother you at all. You wouldn't mind being a chair, because you're not sentient, so who cares if people are sitting on you? But would you mind being a chicken? Would you mind being a factory-farmed chicken?
Yes.
Of course you would. And if you were really in this original position, you would abolish the meat industry immediately.
Absolutely.
Bear in mind, you could still enter the world as a human and benefit from the meat industry. You simply don't know who you're going to be. And if you were a chicken, you'd have the same intelligence and self-awareness as any other chicken has now. But are you willing to take that risk? Chickens outnumber, I'll remind you, humans 3-1. So
are you willing to take that risk? That's the interesting question. If you didn't know what body you were going to be born in, what kind of an animal, or what object, or a human, wouldn't you want ahead of time to design a society as fair as possible so that if you are born into that body, you'll be like, whew, okay, I'm safe here. I'm a cow, but I'm in a world where everybody's going to treat me with dignity and respect and not hurt me. Right? Think about it. Or even whatever color skin you would be born in, whatever family, whatever part of the world. If we create a world where no matter what, body people are born into, they will feel safe, loved, supported, then we'll create paradise here on earth. And this is the point that Alex is making. We must think about others. We must have compassion in our hearts.
So you've got 3 times as much chance of entering the world as a chicken. Nobody in their right mind from this position would...
Did you catch that about the chickens? There are 3 times as many chickens on earth as there are humans. So if this is true, what he's saying is that if this was the kind of way that we would construct society, we would for sure make sure that chickens are really well cared for. Because if we were, let's say, to be reincarnated and be born again into a body of a chicken, we would sure want to make sure that they're not stuck on factory farms, because we could end up in that body suffering, never seeing the sun, never seeing the clouds, never being able to open our wings and bathe in the dust, which is our nature. We would never want to be genetically modified so much that we are so heavy that we can't even walk. We would never want to be born into the body of a mother chicken, a hen, who is stuck laying eggs beyond what she was designed to because of this genetic modification, because of just exploiting them so much that they lay so many eggs that they're constantly weak and they die early, and and their babies are taken away. So I want to see what Alex is about to say. I haven't seen this yet, as I said.
Would design a society that permits the meat industry as it exists today. Think of all the arguments you've ever heard in favour of meat eating, about humans being superior or worth more, or how some people need meat for strength, etc. Would any of these even tempt you to allow the meat industry, because you know that if you were born as a chicken, then your suffering would be worth their pleasure, since they're superior beings as humans? It certainly wouldn't tempt me. So what are we doing here? I'll leave it to your consideration.
Hi, I'm Phil.
So you know what? That is actually, there is more to this. There's a commercial here. Well, let's just see. I'm sort of curious actually to see a little bit more. So there's a commercial here on Alex's channel. So skip that. Part 4, all animals are equal. Well, do you guys want to keep learning? I mean, I'm going to watch it. You guys can stay with me if you want. We're at 27 minutes in this video. I'm just going to watch a little bit more. Oh no, what did I do? Uh-oh, I accidentally lost where we are. Skip the ad here.
Suppose what I want to ask you is a deceptively difficult question.
Oh my goodness, we went to a completely different video. Let me see if I can go back. I hate when that happens. Okay, we're here.
On to the next point, and this is about equality.
Last year was taxing enough.
I'm sorry,
so
guys.
Tax is simple and fun.
Wow, they really like to get their ads in here. Oh, don't worry, we're gonna be done in a sec. All right, I'm not gonna accidentally push the wrong button this time. Skip ad. Let's listen to Alex.
Animals. Surely, you might argue, it's ridiculous to try to draw such an equality between humans and animals. There are quite easily detectable differences, both physically and cognitively, between them. So let's take a look at this claim. Firstly, it pays to remember that we are animals, not a distinct form of being. But secondly, and here's the more important point,
True.
I might just as easily say something like it's foolish to draw an equality between black people and white people because there are clearly identifiable physical and cultural differences between them. But this would completely miss the point. We don't condemn racism because all races are equal. They're not. They look different, they have different proportions, skin colours and eye shapes, and different cultures and different histories, different religions, different biology, and some data even suggests different IQ averages. But the whole point of racial justice is not to deny these differences, but to point out that these differences are completely irrelevant to determining whether or not someone deserves life and freedom. It's not about saying that there are no differences between us, but that despite our differences, we all have an equal moral worth. The same applies to differences in gender and social class, and arguably, species. In other words, to answer the claim that it's ridiculous to see animals and humans as equals, you don't have to in order to recognize that they both have moral worth. But you don't even have to think that human beings and non-human animals do have an equal moral worth in order to justify veganism. There are many ways in which we might determine a human being to have more moral worth than a non-human animal. For instance, human beings have an awareness of the future that most animals lack. If we were killing humans for food, it would just cause pandemonium amongst all of us. But this wouldn't happen with, say, chickens who don't know what's going to happen to them. Now, this is a relevant difference in the sense that if we have to have an industry that converts living beings into meat, it makes far more moral sense to do this to chickens than to humans because of this difference.
So we don't have
However, this presupposes that we do need such an industry at all, which is simply not the case. It might be more moral to kill chickens for food than to kill humans for food, but that doesn't make it actually moral to do either of these. It's more moral to just murder someone than to rape and murder them, but neither of these is moral. So even if we do see animals as having less moral worth than humans, this doesn't justify us treating them as though they have no moral worth at all. But this is an interesting consideration. Should we consider the life of a pig as equally morally valuable to the life of a human? Well,
At the same time, though, you have children, babies, who do not know about the future in the same way that a chicken does. So I don't know if Alex is going to address that as well. But he is making some good points.
no. At least you don't have to. I can't count the number of times I've heard someone say to vegans something along the lines of, well, if you were on a desert island with a pig and a human being and you were about to starve, which one would you kill and eat? You'd kill the pig? See, pigs are worth less than humans. Okay, let's just think about these kinds of comments for a minute. I'll ask you another question. If you were on a desert island with two...
Hold on a second. I just want to point out that he says that he cannot count the amount of times that he heard that argument. So what does that tell you? Now remember, he's stating here that he is not yet vegan, but he's heard that argument so many times that he can't even count it. Again, this goes back to my theory that it takes 100 clicks until you're vegan. He's really studied this a lot.
two humans, one elderly, frail and disabled, the other youthful, intelligent, talented and promising, and you were about to starve, which person would you eat? I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that you should kill the elderly person if you have to kill one of them. But here's the thing. You don't have to kill either.
That's right.
That's just not the situation we're in. Just because you'd rather kill the elderly person than the youthful one because you think they have less moral worth doesn't justify us setting up a meat industry in the real world where we kill and eat the elderly, even if they are genuinely worth less morally.
And how can you tell what is worth less? You know, I talked about donating my organs and how I did not sign my organ donation card. The reason I did that is because I don't want my organs to go to somebody who is going to keep on paying for the rape, torture, and murder of animals. So in this case, if I was, let's say, to die and I would give my organs to an elderly person who is vegan or to a young person who is not vegan, then you know, you have to consider how many lives would I be saving if I count all the lives in that equation, not just the human lives. So it's complex. I don't know if Alex is ever going to talk about that part or not.
Morally. You can easily see a human as more valuable than a pig, but this alone doesn't justify killing and eating the pig. I'll put it another way. Believe me, if I had to make this decision, I would not have a hard time choosing whether to save a drowning sheep or a drowning human baby. But as I say, that's just not the situation we're in. It's more like choosing between saving a drowning sheep or giving a human child a piece of chocolate that it will enjoy.
Exactly.
Which would you choose to do? Save the sheep or give the child the chocolate? I know what I'd do. I'd save the sheep. And I wouldn't save the sheep because I value the sheep more than I do the human. I'd save the sheep because I value its life over a transient moment of sensory pleasure for the human.
Taste buds.
It's not about whether we value animals as much as humans. It's about whether we value animals as much as human taste buds.
That's right.
And in a world where human taste buds can be just as easily appeased by plant-based alternatives as they can by meat. We no longer live in a world that requires meat consumption to sustain even our health, let alone our lives. We can get by easily without meat. I mean, really, do you really think that the reason people still...
Isn't it amazing that he started this video saying he's not vegan yet? He's so close. He's like this close. I wonder if I had asked him at that time, how close do you think you are to becoming vegan? if I told him, look, my theory is that there are 99 clicks, do you think he's at 100 clicks until you're vegan? Do you think he's at 99? Do you think he's at 95? He is talking like he is an actual vegan. And like I said, it might just be a matter of he knows he's still wearing leather, or he still has a fridge full of cheese that he has to get rid of. I don't know. Having said that, though, I just want to clarify that if you wear leather, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not vegan. What veganism is about doing the least harm. So if you decide today that you want to be vegan from now on, and you have leather shoes, it's not the end of the world. You're still vegan. What makes you vegan is that you're deciding not to, in the future, not going forward, hurt any more animals. And you wearing your old leather shoes is not hurting any new animals. Yes, one could argue that by wearing them, you're giving people the message that animals can be used, but let's talk about that at a later time. Essentially, what veganism means is that you're doing the least harm possible at the moment going forward. I have a that at this point, Alex has already stopped buying any animal products. He sure seems like he's very, very close. I have a feeling it's just a matter of getting the stuff out of his fridge, or maybe he's starting to plan who he's going to give it to. You know, the last whatever bit of butter or cheese or whatever. It's fascinating.
They'll eat meat is because they just need it to survive. Of course not. It's because it tastes nice. That's it. So this whole discussion surrounding whether or not animals are of equal worth to human beings is a red herring, because the real contrast isn't between the life of animals and the
when he says a red herring, he's talking about a logical fallacy. On another video, I will talk about many different logical fallacies, like the ad hominem attack and the straw person, which used to be called the straw man, but we're changing it to make it more gender neutral, and so on. But a red herring is what he's referring to, which is a logical fallacy.
Of humans, it's between the life of animals and the taste buds of humans. Now, however much less you could possibly value the life and well-being of an animal to the life and well-being of a human, and perhaps justifiably so, there's simply no excuse for claiming that its value is less than something so trivial as our taste buds. Now, you might claim that there's more to it than that. You might say, for instance, that bodybuilders need meat to sustain their strength. In that case, even if this is true, the question simply becomes, what do we value more, sentient life or bodybuilding?
Well, first of all, it's not true. We've seen it with Nimai Delgado, who is a bodybuilder, and he does not take in any animal products. But second of all, another subject that I would like to discuss is the whole idea of bodybuilding. What is it that makes us think that it's okay to consume all of these extra calories and build bodies for what? Looks? Just to say that you look good? It's not like you're building a body because you have to move pianos all day and big couches. That's different. But anyway, that's for another video.
I'll leave that with you, but just as it may be true that, say, steroids can really improve a person's physical strength, and yet competitions still ban them, we can admit that eating meat might really improve a person's strength, and yet still not condone it, because it's simply not worth it.
I wonder why he's talking this way. He is saying that because does not yet know the facts, it seems to me, because he's saying stuff that is just simply not true. He is talking about meat as if it's something that you need to eat. And we have seen that that's just untrue. Conclusion.
So, to conclude, even if we are superior to other animals in terms of intelligence or capacity for pain or whatever it may be, even if we're not equal, even if we don't have the same moral worth, the meat industry is still morally bankrupt. Clearly, our tastes shouldn't be discounted entirely. There are many things in the world with less moral worth than our taste buds. But the life and suffering of factory-farmed sentient beings is not one of them. Show me the quality that these beings lack, that if a human lacked, we'd shove such humans into tiny cages and grow them so fat that they're crippled by their own weight, and forcibly impregnate them and remove the subsequent child and sell the mother to a slaughterhouse, and you might have the ghost of a justification for eating meat. Besides that, I just don't see it. But if you do think that there is some way to morally distinguish farm animals from human beings, not to mention distinguishing them, by the way, from other species that we consider it immoral to mistreat, like dogs, and in such a way that we can justifiably kill them for meat, then please, for goodness sake, let me know. I'm a sucker for meat. I love it, and I'm genuinely hoping that someone out there can convince me
not gonna
that I'm
happen,
justified
Alex.
in eating it. Don't think that I'm blind to the attraction of bacon or steak, but also don't pretend yourself to be blind to the incalculable suffering that was necessary to get these things onto your plate. Ask yourself, is it worth it? In 1973, Ursula Le Guin published a short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. In the story, Omelas is the perfect city of pleasure, a kind of utopia, in which everyone is joyful and free of pain. But there's a child, a deformed child who's suffering, neglected and starving and in immense pain in a broom cupboard beneath the buildings of the city. And through some technology that's not quite explained, it's this child's immense suffering that sustains the pleasures of Omelas. People sometimes visit the child out of pity or just morbid curiosity, but they're not allowed to show him affection or offer help. Some people, after seeing what it is that's happening in that broom cupboard, simply and quietly pack their bags and leave the city. Take a few minutes to read that short story, the link is in the description, and ask yourself honestly if you'd be one of the noble souls who head for the mountains, or if you push that suffering that you now know to be happening right under your nose to the back of your mind so that you can continue to enjoy your trivial sensory pleasures. It might just be the most important moral question of our time. I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic, and I want to remind you that these videos are produced entirely thanks to your support on Patreon.
So, there you have it. That's Alex O'Connor. Alex obviously got a very good report card. I'm very proud of him. He gets an A. I only gave him 2 little X's. One because of what he was talking about bodybuilders and this sort of idea about meat, because I don't think he is at this point educated on that, and about recommending Peter Singer's book, because like I said, he is not fully vegan himself. But on the other hand, the book itself could maybe be separated from the person. So I can sort of see that. So remember the book A Theory of Justice by John Rawls? You can have a look at that if you're interested. And this short story at the end, I do not know it. I'm going to go back and have a look. I should have probably stopped it because I wanted to write that down. That seems like an interesting short story that he was talking about.
Consider it immoral to mistreat, like.
But thank you for being here today. If you are not yet vegan, please consider being vegan from now on. You can totally do this. Think about the poor, innocent little pigs. They never did anything wrong to us. And also, subscribe to this channel here. Here's my button, which looks kind of fancy here in the light. Subscribe to this channel. We're going to be looking at many other people who are interesting vegans, who are about to be vegan, who are ex-vegans, which is a terrible thing to look at. But we will be looking at all kinds of people. We'll be talking about food, recipes, ethics, everything. So if you enjoyed watching this and learning with me, please subscribe and press the little bell. And thank you to everybody who is a moderator in my videos and helping to keep the mean comments out. And thank you to everybody who is being polite. I will see you in the next video, everybody. Bye-bye for now. Do, 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 do.